The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, hear about the new Arizona Theater Company production of Deceived. The Hermitage No-Kill Cat Shelter is celebrating 60 years of offering hope to animals that need it the most. And I'll talk with Carrie Bates about her remarkable journey from Olympic champion through addiction and to recovery. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. The term gaslighting can be traced back to a British play written in 1938 by Patrick Hamilton. It was adapted for motion pictures twice, and it generated a strong cultural footprint. As recently as 2022, Merriam-Webster cited gaslighting as word of the year due to the vast number of contemporary platforms that are being used to mislead. This month, the Arizona Theater Company is launching its new season with Deceived. It's a modern adaptation by Canadian playwrights Jonna Wright and Patty Jameson. It tells the story of Bella, a young wife who ends up questioning her own sanity because of a number of minor, inexplicable events that keep occurring, from flickering lights to purloined objects, things that others seem reluctant to believe. Joining me to discuss the play are lead actors Lakin McCarty and Tony Roach, and director Jen Thompson. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
So tell me a little something about how you think this play has evolved from what came before. And Lakin, we'll start with you.
Jonna and Patty's adaptation really does distill the story, I think, to tighten the suspense of it. And I think most noticeably to give a lot more agency to its characters. There is Inspector Ruff from the original play who is absent in this. So it really comes down to the four people in this household, their relationships with each other in figuring out what's going on. And I think Bella in particular, rather than having Inspector Ruff there, is kind of in the driver's seat of her own investigation and exploration and possibly salvation.
Jen Thompson, something you said about the adaptation is it provides key roles for women of a certain age, and that you were definitely in favor of that.
Yeah, well, it's great to have a story evolve to a place where the victim, in quotes, turns out to be the person that, rights the ship. Just coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, but I have directed Gaslight in the past, the original play. I think it was 2015, and there's a role of the housekeeper, and that is in that original also, this housekeeper, Elizabeth, who is played then by Amelia White and is played now in our version today at ATC by Amelia White. And they really expanded that role. And in the original, she's really kind of peripheral to the story, and she becomes a big part of the plot and an ally to Bella. And I thought that was a really cool thing that Patty and Jonna had done to give this older woman some agency also and just, increase her footprint in the play.
Tony and Lakin, I'd like to ask you both about your process for creating characters and how you applied it to this particular play.
Creating a character, I always get a little bit
humble.
The playwright to me created the character, and then what we're doing is seeing, how do we actually put it on stage. And for me, I love to try to know as much and think about it as much as possible before starting, but basically holding on very loosely because I don't know specifically what Jen's got in mind, or for that matter, what I'm going to change my mind about once we actually start. We all start talking about it, and it's so different when you read something and intellectualize it versus when you're talking to another person on stage and having feelings or the thoughts in the moment of that. And it's amazing how many things can change from your original idea when you're reading it to what you discover in the moment. The playwright has done things they've done for a reason, ostensibly, and it's more your job to figure out those reasons and make them make sense than it is to start going, well, I don't think that my character would do this, and I don't think it would work that way, because that's just a recipe for spinning out of control. And I think there's, some famous anecdote about an actor saying, I don't think my character would doing that, and the director saying, well, your character wouldn't know, but another actor's character would. So,
And Lakin, you are obviously a very contemporary, very lively person. So, Lakin, how do you make the sacrifices or choices to portray Bella? And also, I wonder about the costuming.
I think it's interesting when we talk about, people from a different period versus now, but those were contemporary people in their time. And, we tend to think of certain sort of like propriety that, even a play set in the sort of shift between Victorian and Edwardian era, we have notions about that sort of propriety. I think I'm interested in where those things falter when people don't act quite in the vein of those expectations.
Well, if you and I wanted to communicate in that era, it would be a long form letter. We wouldn't be able to DM each other or send emojis.
Right. And we talked a lot about it, and even in our rehearsals, even the costuming, to answer your question of how that informs these people, it really does. And it was important to have that element pretty early. It does affect the way that you move. We're set in 1904 about in this production. So even thinking about corsets and how that physical restriction can lead to emotional restriction, but also what happens when there is something within you that is desperately combating that and working against it. So I think sometimes I approach period pieces thinking about how held these people may be, and I'm always surprised how quickly sometimes that disintegrates, because these are people living in that time, and we rebel against those conventions a lot of the time. So it's funny.
And Jen, how is it appropriate for you as director to focus this energy and this reflection on the time period?
I totally agree with everything that Lakin just said. Part of what is so interesting about, for myself, revisiting this play, with now having Bella kind of really, truly at the center of the story and advocating for herself, does feel much more contemporary, which is why they did it. That is the lens. But it is the tension between the period and that's what's fun about it for all of us. And I agree. I think that's a great way to look at it. It's like it was contemporary for them. People felt things. People did things. People had a whole range of emotions and feelings. And yes, of course, we're all products of our time period. But that's what's fun about, it's fun about what our job is, because we get to sort of time travel in a way. But of course, it's massively important that we bring ourselves to the work, especially for actors. That's what theater is. You can do all the other things expertly, but if the people that you're watching on stage, who are the actual communicators of the story, are not living an experience, then who cares? Doesn't matter.
If I can just, going to the letter writing and the emojis and things, there is,
please, Tony,
in this text, there's almost a version, I was thinking as you were saying that, Lakin, that Jack sliding into Bella's DMs by making a sort of very forward move, very deliberate move of being seen and seeing her in person, as opposed to a long, distant campaign of wooing and courting. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you broke in, Tony, because I also wanted to ask you, similar to what I asked Lakin, about playing a man from this different era. At the same time, maybe attractive and repellent?
I hope so. I hope that actually it is both of those things. And I think that the key is trying to not really play either of those. Let the costumes, let the writing, things like that do the work. And there's an axiom in acting of playing the positive, and it's something that I try to hold on to. And Jen's even still had to, I think, with that being something I try to consciously do, direct me sometimes to remember to let's not do this angry, or let's not do this scary, in quotes, that this
but
is a...
My observation is you're playing a character who is under far less restriction than Lakin's character.
Jen did this amazing dramaturgical work on this time period and the play, and about how men almost literally owned their wives. and could have them committed on under any pretense almost they wanted. And just wrapping your head around, when I say this line or when we're in this scene or when we're talking about these things, I hold all the power. Always, basically, is kind of the point there. And it's so ingrained that you don't have to assert the power. It's already there, and they both know. They don't even have to think about it. They feel it because that's the world they live in.
But it's kind of what makes the audience want Lakin to survive.
Yeah.
And to triumph and to win. I mean, not
Exactly.
just survive, to
No.
win.
Yeah.
It's painfully relevant.
So, Jen, I've heard a lot of things about the set. I've heard the term haunted house used. Tell me what a potential audience member might be expecting to witness.
That was the jumping off point. When I approached Alexander Dodge, who is a Arizona native, lives in New York, and was my collaborator here before when I did True West. And I was like, I want to make a cool haunted house. Let's just go for that. I mean, he's an amazing designer, and they have an amazing production department here. And so it's going to be a really fun element to start to play with. For me, the house is really the fifth character of the play. It's a really important element of it. I mean, Bella is feeling like this house is attacking her. So is it haunted? Is she crazy? Is she imagining it? What is the source of this feeling of dread and doom in that home? That's our fun job on the other end, which is how do we support that narrative? The set, because that's where I always start in a process, the set sort of sets that up.
And Tony, I would like to ask you about, in light of portraying a character in a woman-driven story who might just possibly be a real cad.
I mean, it feels fantastic. It's permission, to do some things and behave ways and have thoughts that you otherwise wouldn't or know better than to have or to act on or to, it's all pretend. And so it is. I don't know an actor who isn't going to tell you they don't like playing the bad guy or the potential bad guy, or at least getting to behave badly a little bit in the process. Yeah. So it's a lot of fun, and something's got to balance out.
Quick answer, Jen, do you like directing good guys or bad guys?
Oh, bad guys are always fun.
Lakin, have you had the option of playing a good woman or a bad woman?
Oh, I've actually played a couple of bad women. It's fun. It's really fun.
My guests were lead actors Lakin McCarty and Tony Roach, and director Jen Thompson of the Arizona Theater Company production of Deceived. It runs through October 18th at the Temple of Music and Art in Tucson before moving to Tempe. You can find photos and links on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. Around the world, millions of dogs and cats are euthanized each year because they have no home or are deemed unadoptable due to health or behavioral problems. But here in Tucson, there's a special shelter for homeless cats that's celebrating its 60th anniversary. Over the decades, it has saved the lives of countless cats and helped to create special connections with an infinite number of people. Tony Paniagua visited the Hermitage No-Kill Cat Shelter and Sanctuary to learn about two of these stories.
When Debbie Armstrong retired and moved to Tucson from Oregon in 2012, she was accompanied by her husband and family of felines. More than a dozen cats were part of their household.
I'm one of those who, I watch one of those commercials on TV about those poor animals that are starving or whatever. I have to change the channel. I can't watch it. I love animals, and so it's, I just have to have my cats.
Her four-legged Oregonian entourage has since passed on to kitty heaven, but Armstrong has been replacing them along the way. The Hermitage No-Kill Cat Shelter and Sanctuary is a dependable source.
I had an appointment with an electrolysis, and she has cats, and so we were talking about it. And I moved here with 14 cats, and a couple of them had passed away, and so she had said something about the Hermitage Cat Shelter. That was a mistake. So I came in, and I left here with some kittens, and I've been coming back a lot.
The Hermitage was established by a Russian Orthodox nun who moved to this region in the 1960s. Her name was Sister Teresa Seraphim. She died in 1990, and while current staff members did not get to know her personally, the sister's legacy lives on.
Her mission, I've actually read her book. Her mission was all about the animals all the time. She lived very humbly.
That's Holly Simon, who became the shelter manager this year on its diamond anniversary.
We have been here since 1965, and it was a 1,200 square foot house. So we are located in a neighborhood, which kind of throws people off a little bit. We have a cage-free environment, which means that the cats are free to roam around in rooms. We have different rooms for seniors, for general population kitty cats, for kittens, etc. So when you come in here, you see cats as soon as you walk in the lobby, as well as the rest of the shelter. I think that is very different from most places, being a sanctuary for the kitties, which means some kitties live here. They'll never leave due to a medical condition or a behavior habit. And there are lots and lots of kitties that are available for adoption. Either way, no kitty is ever euthanized for space here.
Before her job here, Simon worked at the Arizona Department of Corrections for more than 10 years, where, among other things, she taught new cadets. When looking for new opportunities, Simon set her mind on this shelter.
I started with the Hermitage in 2019 as a janitor. And then an adoption position came open, and about 8 months later, I took that and did that. But over that time, I learned just about everything there was to learn about the shelter, which helped me transition into shelter manager.
Not only that, but there's something else about Holly Simon and this job. You say you have a certain condition when it comes to cats.
I have asthma, and I also am highly allergic to cats. I've known this for years, but when I started working here, in addition to being allergic to cats, I'm also allergic to a huge amount of things in the environment. So about 2 years into working here, I decided to get allergy tested, and I lit up like a Christmas tree on a variety of things. My two extremes, Palo Verde / mesquite and cats. And I get allergy shots now. I was getting them once a week. I'm to once a month, and they are life-altering. They really are. They're life-saving.
So being allergic to cats wasn't going to keep you away from here?
Absolutely not. This place is magic. I've thought that from the minute I walked in here. I still believe that almost 7 years later. You have an extraordinary group of people here who love what we're doing and love the mission and love the cats. And that this is the first place I've worked where it doesn't feel like work.
That and scores of volunteers, donors, and people who have adopted countless cats keeping the shelter afloat. Tucson resident and frequent Hermitage visitor Debbie Armstrong understands the commitment and dedication. Remember, she moved here with her 14 cats.
At one point, as far as the number of cats, I was down to 7 at one point. I was kind of missing cats. So right now, I'm at 11. Now I will be up to 13 because I'm getting 2 more. So because they're all indoor cats, I never let my cats outside, because people go, gosh, your house must stink. And I'm always afraid of that. But people come in my house and go, you'd never know you have that many cats. My litter boxes are scooped twice a day. I make sure my house is cleaned thoroughly. I will not let my house smell like cat. So it doesn't bother me to have that many cats at all.
The animals are not allowed to roam freely outside, but they do have an enclosed area in the backyard like the cats at the Hermitage.
When we moved here, I added on to the back of my house. My husband thought it was going to be a man cave. Wrong answer. It is a catio.
Debbie, I don't mean to insult you, but have you ever been called a crazy cat lady?
I am a crazy cat lady. I do have a sign at home that does say that I am a crazy cat lady.
However, you can also call her passionate, concerned about cats and other animals.
If you don't want an animal, don't get it. And if you have an animal, make sure you, spay or neuter it. because you know what happens if you don't. I am a firm believer in rescuing animals. When I lived in Portland, I lived in an apartment for a while. The lady that lived across from me, she had a cat. She didn't like it. They were moving. And she just left her cat out in the front. And I said, "What are you doing with your cat?" "Oh, I'm just going to leave it here because I don't want it anymore." What is wrong with you?
After all, she says, pets should be considered part of the family and be treated with kindness, respect, and love. For Arizona Spotlight, I'm Tony Paniagua.
The Hermitage No-Kill Cat Shelter and Sanctuary is holding a 60th birthday celebration on Sunday, November 16th at the Savoy Opera House in Tucson. You can find the information online at hermitagecatshelter.org or look for the link on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. Personally, I am not a sports fan, but I do love the Olympics, and watching it always takes me back to the summer of 1976, when my grandparents and I were thrilled by the gold medal achievement of Romanian gymnast Nadia Comaneci. I was just 7 years old, and I felt like the Olympics were our discovery. I patiently waited for the rest of the world to catch up. I really was a gold medal dweeb. Over the years of hosting this show, I've occasionally gotten the chance to interview Olympians, and I can't help but be starstruck every time. Then I got the opportunity to have a conversation with Carrie Bates, a Scottsdale resident who earned 3 gold medals in swimming at the 1974 Los Angeles Olympics. But I am also in awe of another of her accomplishments. Bates overcame a crippling addiction that almost ended her life and made it into recovery, and she knows she will be in recovery for the rest of her life. But she's now able to share that journey with many other women in need. As a behavioral health advocate and the director of strategic growth and advocacy for Caron Treatment Centers, which is spelled Caron. I started by asking if her experience with Olympic-level athletes lived up to my fanboy expectations.
I do think that Olympians are among the best of the best. I think that we clearly show an incredible work ethic, and we show dedication and drive and pushing ourselves beyond limits that most people wouldn't even dream of physically and emotionally, mentally too, you know. But the reality is that we're actually human beings first, right? And so we're getting up in the morning and putting our pants on one leg at a time, just like people that don't make it to that level of sport. It doesn't leave us immune to the challenges in life, the struggles that can come after the lights go off and our careers end. You know, many of us become defined by sport and by what we do. I know for me, my whole life was wrapped into swimming and to my success in the pool and winning and racing and my friendships, my relationships. Everything kind of revolved around the pool deck. And so when my disappointment 4 years later in 1988 happened and I failed to qualify for the U.S. team and had no plan B for what my life would look like from there, is when I really kind of realized that I didn't know who I was away from swimming. I didn't know what made me happy. All I knew was that I was good in the pool, and then I wasn't.
How much longer was it before you realized that you had a problem, that you needed an intervention?
Yeah, it was many years, believe it or not. In 1988, I will tell you that was the first time I do ever remember drinking for the sole purpose of not feeling. Because as I stood in the stands in Austin, Texas, which is my alma mater, and all of my friends and boyfriend at the time and everybody lined the side of the pool deck, I was in the stands and not on that pool deck. And I didn't even know what to do with those kind of emotions because I had just never thought that was even in the realm of possibility. I did have my challenges over the several years to come after that, but it wasn't until much later in my life that alcohol kind of reared its ugly head in my life and took me down pretty quickly.
Carrie, do you think that you were good at hiding your symptoms from your loved ones?
I think that I was able to hide things for a long time. What we do know about addiction is that it's progressive, it's incurable, and it's fatal. So as my disease progressed, it was much, much more difficult for me to hide things from my loved ones because I was starting to experience consequences. My friends and family are the ones that, intervened and said, you need to take a really hard look at what's going on in your life with drinking. My ex-husband, the father of my kids, was the first one, obviously the one closest to me to say, and we had 2 young girls at the time, and he said, I really think you've got a problem with alcohol and you need to take a look at it. The first time kind of the real red flag flew up in my life was my husband and I had been at a party down the street from our home in the evening, and we had a babysitter at the house, and I went home in a blackout and got in the car and drove the babysitter. I woke up the next morning in an absolute panic because I didn't know if anything had happened, had I been in a car accident. And that's when, when someone else's life was at risk, was really kind of my first red flag.
Do you think that as you started to look for help to get you out of this addiction cycle, that people maybe didn't take you seriously? They looked at your life story and they said, "Oh, Carrie, you can handle this. You don't need professional help."
The people closest to me knew that I had a drinking problem. What I think was underestimated is how to recover from a drinking problem. I think society tends to minimize the severity of it by saying, why can't you just stop? Order a Diet Coke. Just stop drinking. I don't understand why you just can't stop.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that people closest to me were in denial that I was sick, but I think the people closest to me didn't understand the power of this thing and the shame and the guilt that comes along with it for me to be able to get myself to ask for help. On the outside, my life looked amazing. I mean, I had a wonderful marriage and 2 beautiful little girls and a career. I looked like I had it all. But inside, I was dying, right? That's a really tough pendulum swing to live in.
But compare your situation to other women and to women in the early 2000s who were looking for help with their mental health. How culturally do you think we have changed or evolved, or have we, in recognizing that women's problems are absolutely equal to, if not greater than, men's? What are some treatment approaches that you've seen come into play in your years in the field, both as a patient and now as a professional, that you think are going to be showing good outcomes and better results for women?
I do think that we've made a lot of progress, certainly since I walked through the doors the first time of treatment, one of 4 residential treatments that I had to admit myself to in order to find sustainable recovery. We've come a long way. We're not there yet. We've got a lot of work to do regarding the shame women feel. And then if you take it another notch up, moms in particular, who really feel this incredible amount of guilt and shame because we're told things like we're terrible mothers. I was told the last time I went to treatment, just go and then don't come back. Just disappear and the kids will be better off without you here. And we believe that stuff, right? And it's all not true. We aren't bad people trying to get good. We're sick women that need to get well. And in order to do that, oftentimes it means we do have to leave our families for a period of time. And it's very challenging for women to not only internally allow themselves to do it, but then with the pressures and the stigma that comes from other people, make it incredibly, incredibly difficult. If you look at the number of alcoholics on a graph over the last 10 years, the number of men alcoholics in this country, the line on the graph stays pretty flat. It doesn't vary a whole lot. But the women's line goes straight up to the top of the graph paper, and the number of problematic women drinkers in the last 10 years is up about 106%. So that tells you how many people are in need of help and struggling in silence. From being on the side of being a patient, I was blessed enough to go to treatment, to take advantage and have access to a full continuum of care. I needed every single resource that I could use. By the time I got sober in 2012, I had lost really everything but my life, and that wasn't far away. What I experienced as a patient was a lot of talk therapy, which is still very relevant today, a lot of peeling away those layers of the onion that I mentioned earlier before to kind of start getting down to the causes and conditions. Why was I self-medicating? What trauma was hurting me so badly that drove me to think that the answers were at the bottom of a bottle? Now what we've seen in the field is so much advancement with trauma work for women, so much advancement with women's only facilities, women's only sober living, women's only programs out there that are really specializing in the needs of women. And one of the reasons that I work for Caron Treatment Centers is because of the restorative brain work that we're doing at Caron, where we're doing PET scans and multiple different scans of the brain. And literally we can see the disease, we can see anxiety disorder, we can see depression, we can see ADHD, which is another thing that women were often diagnosed with no testing, and much of that testing was incorrect. So we're doing all these brain scans, and we're able to show people in black and white, in living color, this is what you're suffering from, and here's the treatment plan that we're going to suggest for you so you can get better.
If there was one stereotype that you could wave your hand and do away with, one stereotype that you think is hurting women who need treatment, does anything come to mind? Is there a damaging stereotype that we just hold on to relentlessly as Americans that we need to move on from?
Absolutely. And what I would say to every woman that's struggling, that knows someone struggling, is that you are enough, exactly as you are. Perfection is the lowest standard, in my opinion, that women can set for themselves. And we all strive for this non-existent thing called perfection. You know, I look at my life today as kind of a jigsaw puzzle, if you will, where the puzzle is complete, but the corners are kind of worn off and the picture might be worn off in a few areas, and there might be a piece in there that's maybe upside down or backward and it doesn't fit perfectly, but it's kind of hanging on in there. It's kind of just perfectly imperfect. And that's what I think that we need to strive for, is to accept everything about ourselves, and that being sick with either mental health or addiction is not a moral failing. It is not a choice. It is okay to not be okay and to need help and ask for it.
Has it ever gotten easier over the years to share these stories and to share this intimate look into your journey of addiction?
You know, I think that what's gotten easier is how much I embrace and just love and feel so proud of my own recovery. It took me 2 years sober to really be able to look at myself in the mirror again. You know, I mean, I was like brushing my teeth in the shower, not looking in the mirror for 2 years. And then at 4 years sober was the first time I really went public with my recovery. And how I did that was a post on Facebook with a picture of my Olympic gold medal next to my 4-year 12-step program medallion. And in that post, I said, the large medal represents what I did. The small medal represents who I am. And honestly, I am more proud of being a woman in long-term recovery and being able to help other women today, far more proud of that than I am proud of my Olympic gold medals.
My guest was Carrie Bates, a Scottsdale-based behavioral health advocate and the Director of Strategic Growth and Advocacy for Caron Treatment Centers, spelled C-A-R-O-N. There are links on the Spotlight page at azpm.org. Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.